Hi guys, how you doing? I'm just setting up the other one. Bear with me. That's it. Perfect. Perfect. There we go. We're okay. And we'll get rid of the squeaky chair as well. Anyway, well, first of all, we'll say hello to everybody. So give us a little bit of a say hello. Let's see who's following us on the live feed. We've got chat, haven't you? Let's get chat. Let's get chat up and working. That must be that button there. Is that super chat? Super chat. Okay. Okay. Where's my super chat? Come on now, right. Give us an hello. Say hello. Introduce yourself on the live feed, and just so I can see whether it's working on this. I can see whether it's working on this screen, which is clearly the most important bit, isn't it? So, hello, Jay Kelwell. We are recording new films next week. Obviously, you can imagine with COVID, we've not been able to do much about it. But there you go. We're back. We'll be back. Let me just put that on. Let's just have a live chat. We're on. That's better. Okay. Right. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. We're all good, aren't we, about that? Hi Mark, how you doing? Are you all right, bud? Hi Tom. Hi Tony. How are you guys doing? Okay, I hope. Well, tonight is the night where we delve into the history of one of Britain's biggest house builders. And it's a story and a half, this is, I tell you, it really is a story and a half. Yeah, well, just so you know, like say we are filming, as I said, we're filming as of next week, later next week, so those films should start filtering through. I tell you what, when we get back in the flow of things, you'll be having a video once a week, even twice a week. So you're gonna have to keep your eyes open for that. Anyway, guys, let's get on with it. Let's get on with what we're here for. So we are going to tell the story of Taylor Wimpey. Now, a lot of people spell Taylor Wimpey completely wrong, and it's Wimpey spelled Wimpey. Taylor Wimpey. Okay. And I've seen some funny things over the years where people have been making banners up for anti kind of Taylor Wimpey marches and stuff like that, and they've completely spelt Taylor Wimpey wrong. It's not a hard thing, is it really? Anyway, as long as everybody can hear me properly, the Taylor Wimpey story. Okay, now this cannot be told in just one episode of this live feed. It's quite interesting, so we'll maybe do it over a few episodes, but next week we will carry on the new homes buying process video, so we'll get that on there. And don't forget, you can watch us outside of that, no problems at all. So I just need to do one thing first. I just need to share that live feed. Excuse me, I want to just share that live feed straight into LinkedIn. Like Taylor Wimpey is on there. Okay, see if it'll do it. Let's have a look. Just bear with me. There we go. Start a post. There we go. Live feed. Loading preview. There we go. We're done. We're done. There you go. Just share that on my LinkedIn. Well, so Taylor Wimpey as a brand that we know and love, amalgamated out of a lot of different companies, and I thought to myself, do you know what? I'll do some research and we'll see how this brand come about. And it's a story of some of the largest house builders in the country. Hello there, Harry. It's a story about some of the biggest house builders in the country joining in to make the Taylor Wimpey brand. Okay, and it has been a complete story. So we're going to start the story off with some of the different developers that were involved in the whole Taylor Wimpey thing. So our first developer we're going to look at is Taylor Woodrow. Now everybody knows the Taylor Woodrow logo. You can see it there. If you can just see it just there, it's the actual logo with the tug of war, isn't it? It's the tug of war logo. Now let me see if I've got a better picture of that. Yeah, there it is. That's the tug of war logo, isn't it? That everybody knows from Taylor Woodrow. So it's teamwork right from the very start. So that's their motto. But as a house builder, it says teamwork builds the best homes. Okay, so that's what it's all about with Taylor Woodrow, is the teamwork. Now I'm going to tell you the story. We're going to tell you the story about Taylor Woodrow. So today we're going to cover Taylor Woodrow and Bryant. Okay, so we'll find out how the company came to be part of the Taylor in Taylor Wimpey. Okay, so obviously I've made some notes here. So Frank Taylor, he's your man, Frank Taylor. Okay, there he is there, Frank Taylor. That's our man there. So Frank Taylor, which he later becomes Sir Frank Taylor, not bad. He was born in 1905 in Derbyshire. His parents ran a fruit and veg stall right from their living room. Now everybody knows, kind of back in them days, you would do that sort of thing. You would run a few fruit and veg shop from your living room, and people would come. Even into the 80s that was going on. And so that was run from the front room. And then his family moved to Blackpool, where Frank was just 14 years of age. Okay, look at him there, 14. He looks good for 14, doesn't he? 14 years of age. And then Frank, instead of staying within the family business, which probably wasn't big enough for him, he then ended up going to work for another fruit and veg store, or a greengrocers as they were known back in them days. So he took a job at a local greengrocers. But Frank's fascination with the building trade it's a little bit like me, where I used to just sit and watch houses being built and stuff like that. You know, I was very interested as a kid of how houses were built. And Frank then, so he was so fascinated that he spoke to his dad, and at the age of 16, he said to his dad, "Dad, I want to build my own house. I want to build my own house." Now his dad probably thought at age 16, "What? Are you serious? What do you want to build your own house for?" Anyway, when somebody says I want to build his own house, it usually means they want some money, doesn't it? So basically, Frank saved his own money, and he saved £30 and lent a further £70 from his dad. And he had a lot of friends at the time, which he probably, being in the greengrocery trade, he'd met a lot of people passing through and stuff like that. Because in them days, parents were really lazy, and they got their kids to go and buy the shopping, wouldn't they? Send them with a shopping list. So lazy. But he got to know quite a lot of people who were working in the building trade at the time. So his friends, he got them together, and then he was able to start and buy a piece of land and build his own house, which was really two houses that ended up one house, which was actually two, a pair of semi-detached. The other house he'd sold to his uncle Jack Woodrow. The name's coming in now. So we've got Frank and we've got Jack Woodrow. So Frank's surname was Taylor, okay? Frank's name was Taylor. And so he basically built this house, and so he'd made the money back from Jack Woodrow, who also was in that kind of trade as well. So basically they went on, so with the profits from that, they went on to build 2 more, and they were literally being sold quicker than they were being sold quicker than he was building, and in times he was making nearly 100% profit on each of these houses. So he was also, so if you think about it, is inexperience in the building trade, but he got people. One of the best things is, if you're not very experienced at it yourself, find somebody else that is. That's the main thing. So basically he was making 100% profit, and then he went to the manager of the district bank and said, can I lend £400? So he knew that, you know, you've got to have that money to spend it, haven't you? You got to spend money to make money, so to speak. So he eventually got that money, and so by that time he was actually on the way to building 20 houses in total. So he had a portfolio of 20 houses that he'd already constructed, which was really, really good. So that was at age 18. So by the age of 18, he'd built 20 properties already. That's quite good, isn't it? So at age 18, he was still inexperienced, so he enlists the help, because obviously when it's getting busier, you need to get help with all sorts of things like admin and things like that. So he suggested that potentially Jack Woodrow joined the company, which he did, and then that's where the name Taylor Woodrow came from. So you've got the Taylor from Frank Taylor, and you've got the Woodrow from Jack Woodrow. So eventually they were building houses within kind of Blackpool and all of that kind of area. Then there was a move to London on the cards. So completely and utterly randomly, the company AEC, so this was during the 1930, the company AEC, who made buses and trucks, they basically contacted Frank and said to him, you know, we want you to come to London, and we want you to build, we want you to build hundreds of new homes for us, for our workers, because we're going to be moving factory. We want them similar to what you've built. So it was, even though he was small, he's obviously getting known for the quality of his build. So that was really, really good. So basically Taylor Woodrow moved to London, and he obviously, so the building in the northwest kind of, I don't know, it just kind of filtered along nicely. I would imagine. So hundreds of houses were needed, and that's what he ended up doing. So the site for this, the AEC housing site, opened in 1931. So he got his act together quite quickly and got onto that site. 50 homes out of the 1,200. So when he was saying hundreds, he was actually wanting 1,200 new homes. He wanted 1,200 new homes. So eventually they 1,200 Taylor Woodrow homes were sold. So that's pretty damn good, that is, isn't it? So basically they set various different companies up under different names and stuff like that, but only Taylor Woodrow was owned by Frank Taylor solely. Okay, so in 1935, the 5 companies were moulded again back into the Taylor Woodrow Estate brand, okay, and it was floated on the stock exchange. So by the late 1930s, Taylor Woodrow were actually building 1,200 houses a year, which was phenomenal, really. But they were, they were your standard suburban houses. So between the 1930s and the 1950s, Taylor Woodrow marched north, so they went back sort of all over the country. So they ended up sort of building, going up as far as the Midlands, then up to Scunthorpe, and covering a lot of the northern area. Okay, so that was a really good expansion opportunity for them. Okay, so they also started in 1937. Taylor Woodrow also started a commercial side where they were building. They were doing construction, so they were building airfields, they were building roads, etc., factories, ammunition factories, all sorts of big projects like that. So also they were looking at that time for overseas investments and stuff like that. So the likes of Waits, Ideal, and Wimpey were all, planning. Excuse me. They were all planning to. The voice got a bit funny there. So they were all planning to go abroad and take advantage of this investment that's going on. So they kind of all joined forces and made that happen. And even and Taylor Wimpey Homes was quite big, in these other countries like America, Canada, and all of that sort of stuff. So they were really expanding at an alarming rate. So they had developments all over the USA, New York, etc. So the UK market was also prospering. So basically in 1955, Taylor Woodrow were doing 1,400 units a year, so that's really good. Up to 1,500 was the actual target they wanted to actually be at. So it was only proper that obviously it was just called Taylor Woodrow Homes at the time, so it was shortened down and rebranded to Taywood Homes. So that's how the name Taywood became about. So the peak year for Taywood Homes was 1973, and profits were 1.6 million. For the group of a whole, the Taylor Woodrow group, profits were 9.3 million. So that was pretty damn good. Only Barrett's and Fairview, they were doing 3 to 5 million. They were doing 3 to 5 million. So that's, they were well on the way, actually, for, the Barrett. They were well on the way to being one of the biggest house builders in the UK. But as all things, like the house building, around about the 70s to 80s, mid 74, things started slowing down a little bit, and they started looking at what actually is the problem here, and lots of things were taken into consideration. So it was basically on that low. The director then, which was Tommy Fairclough, he was dismissed from his position, and basically he died in the following April. So you don't think he died a very happy man, but maybe died a wealthy man. That would be, So basically, Frank was not giving up easy. He was there. He was basically Taylor Woodrow to the end. Okay. So who actually would succeed him? So it was a long-winded thing, and in 1974, finally Frank resigned as chairman, and he was succeeded by Dick Puttick. And he'd been Dick had been with Taylor Woodrow since, I would say, what's it saying here, around about 1940. So he'd actually worked his way up through the business, up to MD, and then in 1979, Sir Frank by then finally stood down, but remained on the board. So he was still holding on for his dear life, wasn't he? Of actually steering the ship all the way to the end. So Dick, he basically Dick ended up going, and again that was actually, he was replaced by Frank Gibb. Okay, so Sir Frank was actually with Taylor Woodrow until the very end. By the 1980s, Taywood Homes were building 500 to 600 units a year. So by 1988, so that's in the space of probably what is it, 7 years, they reached 1,000 properties. So that's just in the UK house building market alone. Okay, so the next man in charge was in the 90s was Tony Palmer. So Tony was, I'll show you a picture of Tony. That's Tony Palmer. So Tony was one of those people who really worked well within the company. Okay, and he took the company into new places. So the first thing was Tony wanted was expansion in the 90s. So what he ended up doing is buying the West Country brand Heron Homes, and he brought it for 31 million. And so basically by 1994, Taylor Woodrow were doing, thanks to the Heron Homes acquisition, they were doing 3,000 homes a year. But also they had property developments in North America and Florida. So by the end of the 90s, the profits were at 125 million. 78 million of that was just in property. That's pretty impressive, really, isn't it? For figures. So poor Tony. Tony retired in 1979. I got that wrong. He retired in 1997. So he was actually replaced by John Castle. So John Castle, what can we say? He lasted 5 months in that post, 5 months, and he alienated every single one of them. So he was not the man for the job. So he went, and funny enough, he actually tried to sue Taylor Woodrow for 500,000. 500,000. He tried to sue. Sorry, when a message comes up, I try not to read it. Well, I'll catch up with them. He was trying to sue Taylor Woodrow for 500,000 for wrongful dismissal. Okay, so there you go. But he was on a salary of £225,000 a year. Look at that. So John just didn't do the business. He didn't cut the mustard, did he? So it was time for the next acquisition. So Taylor Woodrow were always looking to buy the next big thing, and they had their eye on the Bryant group for so long, and they were just with envious eyes. They were envious eyes looking at the Bryant Homes group. Look, let me just get that in focus for you. We want Bryant, or do they just want the land bank? More than likely. So basically, what they wanted was that brand. So let me just rewind a little bit. Okay, yeah. So they were keen on acquiring the Bryant brand, and in January 2001, 632 million was what it took to get Bryant. So it was a bit of an awkward one, this one, because they pipped Beazer Homes at the post. The deal was going down, and they got in there just at the right time and got the deal. So that was what it took. So what it meant is it took Taylor Woodrow, their output went up to 6,000 houses a year. So making it the big number 4 in the house building league board. Okay, so the next man in charge was Paul Phillips. Paul Flip. It looks like Phillips, but it's Phipps. Phipps. He was in charge for basically, there was a few more head changes going on, and they basically moved the entire Taylor Woodrow caboodle housing division right up into Bryant's office in Solihull. So that would have been, just imagine that they've been in Solihull for decades, and then all of a sudden they've moved the whole caboodle up. This alien house builder from down south has come up, and then they've basically taken over their office. So I think what would happen then is everybody at Bryant were probably thinking, well, we've worked hard for this Bryant brand. Oh, we know what, they're just going to get rid of it, and everything's just going to be called Taylor Homes, and that's it. Bryant's gone forever. Well, that is not necessarily true, because basically they decided that that they were going to keep the Bryant brand. Okay, so what they decided to do with the Bryant brand is change it. So they changed the Bryant brand, if you have a look, and it featured the tug of war logo. So they changed it from the tick, and then it become the Bryant. So it's Bryant Homes by Taylor Woodrow. Okay, so the logo changed and the tug of war logo became. So that was it. So what they did is they basically then closed their own brand, Taywood Homes, because Bryant Homes had a better reputation, and it was, everybody knew Bryant, and everybody knew Bryant for the quality. So that's why we'll be going on to Bryant in a minute. Okay, so they knew that's what they could do. So they weren't finished. So they were running with the Bryant. So they expanded the Bryant brand. And what that enabled them to do is actually get a lot more cash ready. So what they ended up doing is they set their sights on the next developer, which was Wilson Connolly. So Wilson Connolly was a developer, and they were under the brand Wilcon Homes, short for Wilson Connolly. Pretty much the same as what they've done with Taylor Wood. If you think about it, Tay Wood, put them together, you've shortened the name, Taywood Homes, and then obviously there you've got Wilcon. Isn't that interesting? Actually, I didn't think about that until today. That's quite an interesting thing, isn't it? So with the acquisition of Wilcon, that gave them 10,000 home a year output. Whoa, 10,000 homes. You can't argue with that. So the Taylor Woodrow brand were known for mass house building and construction, okay, all over the world. Okay, so the next thing, basically, what happened then, things were changing at an alarming rate. I think a lot of developers had disappeared by then. You had other developers like the George Wimpey group and snapping up Persimmon, snapping up Beezer, all that sort of thing, because things weren't great on the house building market at all. So in March 2007, it was announced that a merger with George Wimpey will happen. It was worth $6 billion, okay, this merger. So what it meant is the original shareholders of Taylor Woodrow had just 51% of the new company. So the new company was put together and it became Taylor Wimpey. So we kept Frank Taylor, kept his name, lost the Woodrow completely, and then became the new brand Taylor Wimpey, which we know today. Okay, so Taylor Woodrow provided the new chairman and the finance director, and the chief executive came from Wimpey. So they weren't finished yet. I think it got to the point where Taylor Woodrow or Taylor Wimpey just wanted to be a sole house builder. Okay, so things were happening in the in their overseas ventures and stuff like that, which we'll go on to when we talk about the other developers. But in 2008, Wimpey plc acquired Taylor Woodrow Construction from Taylor Wimpey for 74 million. So that meant Taylor Wimpey then became a sole house builder. Okay, so that's quite an interesting story, that is, isn't it, guys? So that is how we acquired. So, you know, let's give this guy his our complete utter respect there, because, you know, he stayed there and he built an empire, you know, the Taylor Woodrow Empire, and you know, and even now his name, the Taylor in the Taylor Wimpey, is still there, you know, forever. And, you know, and we mustn't forget some of the amazing schemes that you know, Tay Wood Homes built. You know, amazing schemes like this, canal marinas, St Catherine's Dock. They even saved a boat there, you know, a ship there that was going to be scrapped. So they did so much in that space of time, didn't they? You know, so kudos to them. So now we know where the Taylor Woodrow side of things came from, don't we? So that's quite a very interesting story, don't you think? So let's tell the story of Bryant Homes now. So Bryant Homes, I'm sure everybody's heard of Bryant, but I'll tell you what we'll do before we start. Have you guys got any questions or comments on the Taylor Woodrow story? So I'll just go on my screen here. Okay. Let's have a look. Okay. Yeah. Hi. Just say hello to a few of you. Hi, Oliver. It's IKEA man again. He's back. That guy. What that guy doesn't know about flatback furniture isn't worth knowing. Longshanks, hello. Tom, hello. Yeah. So, are any Taylor Woodrow house types in use today? Now, that's quite an interesting story, because not many of them are. I bet maybe one or two. I think they got rid of them completely. I don't really think they were kind of, you know, suitable for the brand really. But a lot of Bryant house types and a lot of the Wimpey group house types were used. They were used in that sort of merger. So, you know, you'll see some of the house designs that you know, I'm going to show you today, and they echo the vision. But yeah, but anyway, go back though, you know, Wilcon Homes were very, like I say, the Wilson Connolly takeover, Wilcon, they were very distinctive houses because they had a lot of brick banding, a lot of brick detailing on them, and they look quite nice actually. And they, like I say, into the 90s they were quite a big developer really. Wilcon Homes, and they did quite well. I remember they had I think their head office may have been in Stourbridge, in the middle of a housing estate that they built. They had a big site over there. But you know, that's the way it goes. So let's go on to Bryant, the beloved Bryant Homes. Bryant Homes. Let's have a look what we've got here. Bryant Homes. Invest in quality. Invest in quality. And then it says, before you invest, we invest. Okay? Okay. Now, this is a good story. So, Bryant, the Bryant Group. So, the Bryant Group was from the Midlands completely. So, it was started as a contracting company. So, that means commercial, building roads, all sorts of bits and pieces like that, really. So, it started as a contracting company in 1885 by Chris Bryant. And Chris moved to Birmingham at age just 20, and he trained himself in carpentry as opposed to having an apprenticeship. So the thing that was quite popular. I mean, you know, being a landscaper, as you know, I was an ex-landscaper. I pretty much trained myself to be a landscaper. I didn't get any training or anything like that, and I think sometimes that's the best way you can learn. You can learn to do a job that way a lot quicker, and you make those mistakes, and you sure make sure you don't make them again. That's the rule, isn't it? So he basically he started the business from his home in Smallheath in Birmingham. Within a few years, he was building houses and factories. In 1927, Chris Bryant and Sons was registered as a registered business, and his son, which makes the and Sons, his son's name was Ebenezer, and basically Ebenezer had a grammar school education, so he was, you know, he was pretty clued up with them. As you know, doesn't really mean just because you leave school and you don't have any qualifications or anything, it doesn't mean you can't succeed in life. Yeah, you've got to try harder, but you know, you take Alan Sugar for instance. You know, there's, you know, it's the old school hard school, isn't it? So he basically, Ebenezer was very interested in following in his dad's footsteps. So he started training as a carpenter. So that's obviously what Chris Bryant's trade was. Is he was a carpenter. So Chris died in 1928. Okay, and his son took over. Ebenezer took over with the assistance of Frank Russon. Now Frank was so instrumental in the Bryant name completely, and he really sailed the ship in the right direction, you know. And he later became the director. So during the 1930s, Bryant built up to 2,000 council houses a year. So they had a great contract with Birmingham City Council, and there's large areas of like Solihull and, you know, parts of Smallheath, Erdington and stuff like that that have such a massive amount of Bryant houses completely. And so he decided that he could see that other companies like Wimpey and actually fact, when you think about it, actually quite a lot of companies came out of Birmingham. So Wimpey's were from Birmingham. McLean's, the Tarmac group were from Birmingham. Bloor, they're kind of Midlands based as well. So you know, the Midlands was actually churning out some very, very good developers back in the day. And so, you know, the private sector started in 1933, and the first detached houses were built on the Cedars estate in Erdington. So Ebenezer, or Eb as he was known, died in 1952, and the third generation took over, and that was Christopher, another Chris, which is what you do, isn't it? You name it after your dad. So Christopher was just 28 when he took over the C. Bryant and Sons, age 28. So so basically, hang on a minute. You know, when you've written something, can you? Yes, that's it. Yeah, what about Frankie boy? Yeah. So basically, Chris worked very closely with Frank Russon. He worked very, very closely with him. And Frank, he'd actually left school at age 14. And Frank was originally a bricklayer and actually fought in the Battle of the Somme. And then later, he fought in the Battle of the Somme, then became a quantity surveyor. So you can't argue with that kind of pedigree when you're building houses. So until now, till now, into the 1950s, Bryant were known for just contracting and the odd houses, the council houses and stuff like that. So in 1954, Bryant Estates was formed, and then they started house building. So they were doing a roundabout speculative house building, meaning they're building their own houses. They were building 350 units a year. And then the company, Bryant Estates, was floated on the stock exchange in 1960. So this is Bryant Homes. Bryant Homes has been born. So Chris became both the director and the chairman of the company. And there was another person within the company called Roy Davies, and he was a character in Bryant's history. And he'd been actually, and Roy Davies had been running Bryant Estates from around about 1958 until 1987. So he really pushed Bryant into that, into that streamline that they had. So when I'm talking streamline, this is a kind of typical 1980s Bryant house. Now, what's really unique about the Bryant houses was the materials palette. Bryant used the same materials, the same windows. So no matter where you go in the country, you would recognise a Bryant house by the windows. And that's what makes me a housing historian. And people go, well, how do you know all these houses? How can you go somewhere and know who built what? And a lot of the giveaway are the windows, the style of the windows, because developers had a certain, especially a wooden one, certain styles of windows that they built, even the garages. And that's how sometimes I know. But they the good thing, how they streamline Brian is to actually have a very certain portfolio. So they had and they built those on the same estates, and they were just that range of smaller, from semi-detached to the detached range, and they went like hotcakes. They were really went well. So Roy Davies, obviously, like I say, he was a bit of a character, and he started with Bryant in 1941, and he was actually a trainee surveyor. So in 1973, Bryant's then with Roy and Chris working together, in 1973, Bryant Homes declared profits of 4 million, which was outstanding. Okay, so 1973, 4 million, and in 1972. Bryant's got into a little bit of trouble with one of their contacts. It was city centre architect, what I think they used, and he got into trouble. Something to do with conspiracy to corruption, and basically he got jailed, and some of the former business associates were jailed as well. But fortunately, Chris was okay, and it didn't really affect him. But what actually invariably happened is the share price dropped, and then when a share price drops, then the house builders come sniffing around, and Alfred McAlpine started sniffing around the Bryant Group. Yes, come on, Alfred McAlpine around. So also, who came sniffing around? It was Taylor Woodrow, because the company, so it was either sink or swim. Okay, it was either sink or swim. So the only problem we had, right, was that our friend Roy was not great on expanding into other areas. So having regional offices, it didn't really sit that well with him. And that, in sort of during the 80s, late 70s, 80s, a lot of developers were setting up regional offices, and they enabled them to grow really rapidly and double their turnover. So begrudgingly, in 1976, the new Southern Region office opened, and that was headed by Andy Mackenzie. By then, a lot of Bryant were actually being sold via the Maitland Selwyn Group, which was earlier set up by Sir Eric Pontaine of the Midland and General Group, and later the Tarmac Group. And they were the estate agent. Maitland Selwyn were the estate agent, their go-to estate agent for selling your property. And I remember in the late 80s, 90s of actually going to the, I think it may have been near the Bullring in Birmingham, to the Maitland Selwyn offices, and actually going and get on all these amazing Bryant brochures from all of these sites that were in and around Solihull, because they were building a lot of big houses back then. So with that share price, they decided then, go big or go home. So they went big. So what they ended up doing is they started opening regional offices. So in the 80s, into the 80s, the bees were around the honeypot and waiting for a takeover bid. So Andy Mackenzie took over as Group ND in 1988, and Chris was chair until 1992. So during the 90s, or the other region, so during the 90s, then that was really pushing it there. They beaten off Taylor Woodrow and Alfred McAlpine with a shitty stick, and just let's off. So they opened up new offices in Yorkshire, Warrington, and in Edinburgh, and then it gave them in a good position. They started really expanding then. So by 1996, Bryant then made their first acquisition, and that was Admiral Homes. So they were still feeling the pinch. Because we were going in and out of recessions and stuff like that. So it was a real sort of struggle for any house builder that was going on, So Andy resigned in 2000, and Peter Long became the chief exec, and he was an outsider. He'd not worked within the company before, so Peter Long was the man for the job then. So a merger was on the cards that would be beneficial for the longevity of Bryant. So Bryant and Beezer started talking. So Beezer, they decided that they were going to do an equals business. So Beezer and Bryant were going to set up a company called Domus PLC, and so that was what the plan was. But right at the last minute, Taylor Woodrow got in there with the 539 million, and then in February 2001, Taylor Woodrow was part of the brand. So they took over. By 2001, they'd taken over the Bryant brand by then. So what they ended up doing is they kept the Bryant name. As we'd said. But what they started doing is, let's just look at the house types really first of all. So this is the Bryant that we all know and love, isn't it? The Hayden, this amazing sort of product range. Look at that one. Yeah, the Victoriana collection that was the Victoria. If the Victoriana was a battleship, I would have said it fought well for them over the years. So once under the Taylor Woodrow brand, this is some of the developments that we were getting. So this is the sort of thing that they were knocking out. Okay. House types like the Fernley. You can see that totally. Kept the windows. The windows were kept. The Hurstwood. So these were complete and utterly stripped back houses. It was all about making profit. Okay. The Longworth, look, the Longworth, which later became, it actually is a actual Taylor Wimpey house type now, but actually it was out of the Bryant Victoria that house type was. So going on and on, this is what we ended up doing, and like yeah, look at, I mean, look, you've got that one. They just unfortunately lost that certain something, didn't they? Under that. So they stripped back, and then they decided then it was the money machine, then wasn't it? It was the money machine that needed to be go. So the name said so. Basically, from 1979, Bryant went from 1,500 units to basically 4,000 units, 1,500 units to 4,000 units in 1997. The Bryant name was phased out in 2010. So, what can we say about Bryant? I think it was a good job it was phased out, because I think it would have been running to the ground completely. But the Taylor Wimpey group, the Taylor Wimpey did take the best of their designs, and it's funny, a lot of the bigger Bryant designs are being built further afield in Scotland. Some of those are, but you had this clever synergy of house types from Wimpey, the Wimpey group, and the Taylor Wimpey and the Bryant group brought together, and that's all the houses that you see today, those different designs. So yeah, it's actually called the Evesham. It is, or the Fakenham is the name. So we're just on about that house type that we were on about just. Yeah, it is called the Evesham, or it's called the Fakenham as well, which you can look at that on our channel. So they used a lot of those designs, which was really good of them, wasn't it? So whether those two, with that story, those two there, that Taylor Woodrow story, I think it's very interesting. So next time we will be looking at the Tarmac group and Wimpey together. How did they become so big, and how did they end up being the Wimpey side of Taylor Wimpey? Okay, so guys, that's how. I hope you enjoyed that. So I'm going to open the floor up to a few questions now, if you want to. So fire me some questions at me, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what he's saying there. Some of these house types, like the Cavendish, the Sterling, and the President, they were all Bryant designs, and they're actually being built. Those houses, and they've still kept the name. So the President they've still kept the name. But that's it. That's the thing, isn't it? Wimpey didn't have any high-end houses. That was the thing. The McLean group, Tarmac and all that, they didn't have big houses like Bryant's did. Bryant's were purely a high-end developer. Yeah, I mean, I wonder what they would be like if Wilcon were here today. I wonder what sort of houses they'd be building, or if Bryant were here today, I wonder what the brand would look like. Are they all going to go the same way as some of the other developers? Are they all going to go the same way? Now, the McLean merger we will talk about on the next video, because that's quite a complicated story, that is. But we'll also be able to tell you on the McLean Wimpey story about the overseas, the Taylor Morrison homes and stuff like that. So yeah. No, the Bradenham isn't an original design. It isn't an original design. The certain house types are like, for instance, we've got the Lavenham. The Lavenham is an original Bryant house type. There's a lot of the smaller ones like the Fernley and stuff like that. So when we actually do our final Taylor Wimpey video discussing Taylor Wimpey's journeys, because we'll do this in 3 parts. The next part obviously will be the Tarmac group story. And then the next part after that will actually be the Taylor Wimpey story as we know it today. How far have they come? Because obviously we've got a lot to talk about with Taylor Wimpey. We've got the Fleecehold scandal. We've got, the Milton Keynes housing estate. So there's lots of different things. So yeah, Tom, actually send me that. Be interesting, that is. But as far as I know, in terms of like our McLean region here, we didn't have we in our McLean group, in the Tarmac group, we had McLean Homes, Midland and General Homes. There was Thamesway Homes, Rivermead Homes, Thomas Lowe Homes, and Tarmac Homes. All of those. It's a big old company, Tarmac were. So you know, that was a bit of an interesting story. So guys, okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I know it's short. Well, we've only cracked at an hour on that, but join me next time, guys. And next week we'll carry on the story, or we potentially will be carrying on the home buyer's journey. Or it just depends how I feel, really. I hope you all have a great week, and like I said, we'll be filming next week, filming some new show homes next week. It's going to be a slow but sure process. So I hope you all have a good week, and we hope to see you. Very soon. And guys, don't forget, if you don't subscribe to the channel, click the subscribe button now. But also, we've got on Facebook, we've got a Showhomesonline followers group. So you guys are able to have conversations in there and talk to each other and ask questions and stuff like that. That's a group for anybody who's into Showhomesonline or at House, and I'll put some of mine on there. So yeah, so that is all you've got to do. You just go onto Facebook and put Showhomesonline followers. Then just click that and away we go. Okay, Showhomesonline followers. Guys, let's carry on the house builder histories next week, and I'll catch you later.